Darkcast Network. Indie pods with a dark side.
Hi, my name is Mallory Jenner Robinson. Join me on A Hateful Homicide, a true crime and investigative journalism podcast dedicated to telling the stories regarding the murders and hate crimes of our transgender, non-binary, intersex, and two-spirit community members in the United States and abroad. This is A Hateful Homicide.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan, what's up?
Oh, my gosh. I just had a really good food.
Okay.
I'm so not hungry right now. You know?
You're satisfied?
Yes.
All right. Well, that's positive. Nobody wants to be hangry.
How are you, Heather?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there.
Okay.
You know, this is episode 486, Dylan.
That's a few episodes.
That's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big deal when you close in on that 500 episode mark, right?
And you know who it makes this all happen?
Who?
Well, I do. No, our listeners.
Yes.
And we have a new patron, so let's give a shout out to Judy. She is sponsoring today's show, and it's folks like Judy who keep us going, keep the lights on here at Mountain Murders, and really make all this possible. So thanks, Judy.
Thank you so much, Judy. She's responsible for everything I say during this episode and how I conduct myself.
See,
if you will.
When you say things like that, Dylan, I think that deters people from supporting the show.
People's like, can I withdraw my sponsorship?
They do not want to be responsible for anything that comes out your mouth. I know I don't want to be responsible for it.
No, but seriously, Judy, it's all her fault today, what I do and say. Thank you so much. And thanks to all our listeners, because you guys are amazing. And it's truly the only reason we're still going. And when I think about it, it just blows me away. I can't believe.
I thought you were going to say when you think about it, you touch yourself. And I was going to have to cut the mic off.
You know, I could sing that song. I sing that song in the car by myself.
So do I.
Very
I love that
loudly.
Song. The Divinals were fantastic.
But I'll save you right now and not do it. But no, it's just incredible that we're going all these years and years later. That's a lot of long-form content.
That's many hours of true crime podcasting.
And I will take all the praise for having made it happen. You're welcome, Heather.
We know you usually do. All right, Dylan. Today we have obviously a case we've never discussed before, but we're going to be talking about a serial killer. It's been a minute since we've had a serial killer case.
It has, and I tell you, I'm yet again blown away that I do not know about this case. This person is a monster. A really gross monster.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Let's get into it. Dylan, Kendall Francois was born in Poughkeepsie, New York on a hot summer day, July 26, 1971. Locals like to call this area the Lower Hudson Valley. It's about 90 miles north of New York City and 75 miles south of Albany, His father, McKinley, was from rural Louisiana. The Francois family had French-Haitian roots. McKinley was one of 9 children. Paulette, Kendall's mother, was from Virginia. Her parents, Mitty and Roy Blackwell, were deeply religious. Mitty cooked Southern meals like okra and black-eyed peas. When Paulette was 8 years old, the Blackwells moved to New York. They didn't fit in with the Northerners, who often made fun of their accents and what they called strange Southern food.
What are these peas that's got the black eyes?
Many Southern transported African Americans were shunned and ridiculed by the urban Black community at this time. I've actually heard from folks this is not uncommon. I think this still happens today.
I've never I've always thought that when it was someone from out of the area or, from far away, thousands of miles, if you will, I don't make fun of their accents in the way that I think it's interesting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I always thought it was fascinated by hearing like different accents and stuff like that. I've never quite gotten the make fun of people.
I don't either, but I think maybe we're just different.
Okay.
Or like what Kendrick said.
Kendrick said they're, not like us.
They ain't like us. Now, the Blackwells were both on staff at the Hudson River State Hospital for the Insane, working in food service. By the time Paulette was 20 years old, she was also employed there. Paulette was described as bubbly and enthusiastic. McKinley Francois was considered quiet and standoffish, though family said he had a good sense of humor. Kendall had 3 siblings, Raquel, who didn't live with her family. It seems growing up, she lived with relatives, and we may get an answer about that. I think Raquel had good reason maybe to not reside with her family. And like I said, we'll get into that in a minute. There was Aubrey and Kirsten. Kendall lived in a low-income apartment building on Fulton Avenue until he was about 4 years old. And then the Francois family purchased a Victorian home located at 99 Fulton Avenue, just down the street from these low-income apartments, around 1975. The house was built in 1869. It was about 1,500 square feet, but at the time it was run down and needed some work, like it had exposed beams, chipping paint.
I think that gives a Victorian house character.
The Francois, who were both working parents, didn't invest time or money into restoring the home. I'm assuming they were just busy, but it seems like the house further kind of declined. The property was never really taken care of over the years.
So when they got it, it already needed
it was pretty run down.
Some TLC.
Yeah.
And they never really did anything.
Right,
like
and it's a beautiful historic home. So a lot of people in the neighborhood didn't understand why you would buy this house and then put no money into fixing it up.
Oh my gosh, could you imagine having a house built in the 1800s?
No, I would love that.
I bet it's cold though.
Paulette was an active parent who was concerned with her children's education. She enrolled Kendall and his siblings at Arlington schools, which were all white at the time. And it seems like they were they were like out of district, or it was not the school for their neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
But she, put forth a special effort to get them enrolled at this school. I guess it was considered like a better school at the time. McKinley was an absent parent. He worked long shifts at the DuPont factory, so he was really not involved. Teachers didn't really recall ever seeing him at school functions or events, that kind of thing. Kendall was considered bright, but not academic. He didn't have a lot of friends growing up. He mostly hung out with his siblings. The Francois did not allow their children to bring friends home.
That's kind of weird.
They had a rule like you're not allowed to bring anyone to the house. During the 5th grade, teachers began noticing Kendall's lack of motivation. He refused to do schoolwork, just flat out refused to do it. And when they would call him out, he offered up only impassive, silent stares.
Wow.
At the teachers. He made straight F's that year.
Straight F's?
Yet there was this duality to Kendall. He was quiet, timid. A friend recalled that he was too shy or afraid to even voice his choice of pizza toppings. Like if they went out to get pizza, the other guys would say, I want this or that. And he would just sit there like he was too afraid to even say what he liked on pizza.
He'd be like, I want pepperoni. Tell him I want pepperoni.
Yeah. The friend said, quote, you got the feeling nothing ever went his way. The friend felt that Kendall was kind of going nowhere in life, even when they were young.
Have you ever had a friend like this?
I mean, I hate to say it, but I knew kids growing up that I would think, yeah, you're going
to be a loser when you grow up?
You're going to end up in prison.
It's just because they don't care.
You know what's crazy are the kids that I always thought that person's going to end up in prison or whatever. They are. They are still adult pieces of shit.
Well,
because they were kind of piece of shit kids.
Well, I think even as children, we recognize antisocial behaviors, right? I mean, just the kid who always it can never follow the rules, right? The kid who wants to keep talking when the teacher tells the class to get quiet and let's get started. Just all
They're
the
just
time.
little delinquents.
It's just part of their...
The kids stealing the lunch money. The kids looking up girls' skirts. Stuff like that.
Yeah. The one that keeps on and like just bugs the shit out of people,
Dude,
you know?
I remember in elementary school, there were these two boys and they were like best friends. And they were both just, like just pieces of shit, even as kids. Like I didn't like either one of them. One of the guys totally gave me creepy vibes. Like even as a kid, I would think like, oh, I don't even want to be alone in a room with you. I don't want to be partnered up with you. Like he gave me like super ick vibes. And then years later, like when we were adults, he was arrested for, being a predator, like a pedophile.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
And is like serving like 40 years in prison for being a fucking pedophile.
wow. So he did something really bad.
Yeah. And then his little buddy, his little sidekick is just like a career criminal. Like has been in and out of jail since we were like 16 years old.
It's funny.
Like if I said his name, you would know exactly who he is because in our hometown, he's got a reputation for just being like, it's just fucking trouble all the time.
Man,
But they were like that in elementary school. And I knew, I would always think to myself, you guys are just going to end up in prison or something. And then they both are. So,
well, there you go. Yeah. I mean, you already know, you already have those feelings about each other. I mean, a group of kids is just, a small clan of, or a clan of small adults, I mean, you still have all the politics and the dynamics of, any group of people.
yeah. So,
Does that make sense?
So Ricky and Sean, you're both dumbasses.
What the? Ricky and Sean?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. You can't get those two together.
Now, during the 1980s, IBM, which had their headquarters located in Poughkeepsie, kind of tanked. And they laid off a lot of engineers and other employees, which devastated the local economy because people were really making like great money working for IBM. It was like middle class, upper middle class incomes.
Yeah.
And when these people lost their jobs, they either moved out of the city or there was no work. So then drugs infested the area. Prostitution ran rampant in the streets. Kendall was kind of a geek. As a kid growing up, he was into geeky stuff. He liked Star Wars, Star Trek. This is weird, Dylan, but his favorite movie was Harrison Ford's Regarding Henry.
Damn, that is a weird one.
Which he would call a masterpiece.
So he was a nerd before nerd culture was cool.
Like Dungeons and Dragons,
Right.
comic books. Yeah. And I'm not like disparaging people who are into that because you like geek stuff. You're into geek culture.
Yeah.
I know you like anime and sci-fi and all that.
Well, no, I like anime, sci-fi. I suck with computers, but I can listen all day about people doing penetration tests and things like that, and security. Maybe I should go into that.
What's a penetration test?
It's when you actually either
See, I'm not a geek, so I don't know what that means. Okay.
either their system or a physical penetration test trying to do.
Oh yeah.
I'll show you later.
Is that like when you put your finger on somebody's butt?
It's a social engineering where you actually go kind of talk your way into a company to where you can maybe get your hands on the servers, plant a little Raspberry, a little computer with some malware on there, or steal some IP, some intellectual property.
Okay, that sounds like nothing that I'm interested in. So cool. Thanks for that.
You just like the name.
No.
You need a T-shirt that says penetration tested.
Stupid. Well, if I get it, I'll have to buy it myself because Lord knows you don't buy gifts.
Well, no.
So anyway, his favorite movie, like I said, Regarding Henry, which is just kind of a strange. I hadn't even thought about that movie since it came out in like 1991.
Look, I gotta say, no matter the young person who's just over the moon, or even anyone who like that's their masterpiece, their opus, if that's the right word to use there. Regarding Henry?
Yeah,
I mean, really?
He loved The Lion King. Kendall watched mostly science fiction and cartoons. He was into Queen and Billy Joel, not Billy Idol.
There's a big distinction.
Yeah,
there.
I know. And I love both of them. I love Billy Joel. I love Queen. But, I guess for a young black man growing up in the 70s and 80s, those were probably not hugely popular musical groups among young black males at that time.
Well, no, let's be
'Cause
honest.
he didn't like hip hop. He hated it. He didn't like that. Like he would say, I don't like that culture.
He doesn't
of
like
rap-
funk. He
of
doesn't.
like rap music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a young black male who's into nerd culture, Queen, and Regarding Henry's his favorite movie. And he's
It's just different.
painfully shy. He's going to stand out, you know?
Well, he's also going to stand out for other reasons, Dylan. And we'll get to that here in just a second. So Kendall, he held a grudge, and he could recall every mean comment that was ever made to him, which was a lot. From the time he was a small child until he reached adulthood, people called him Stinky.
Oh.
Kendall was a large child. He had poor hygiene habits. And by the time he was in middle school, he stood about 6'4" and weighed 250 pounds.
Damn.
Though he was neatly dressed, usually in a button-up shirt with a sweater vest or sweater, compared to most other kids who were in jeans and t-shirts at school, he had horrible body odor, coupled with the fact that, he doesn't shower regularly. He's a big kid.
Look, the bigger you are, the cleaner you need to be. I'm sorry, I live by that. I live by that personally.
As a big boy.
As a big boy.
In high school, Kendall wrestled and played football, though his teammates recalled he was mostly humiliated, like during practices and on the field. He always left wheezing because he wasn't in great shape, but he showed up every day to practice and, tried as hard as he could.
Well, and that says something.
Kendall graduated from Arlington High School in 1989 and enlisted in the U.S. Army. He was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Then he was stationed in Hawaii. Kendall learned to fix radios in the Army. Instead of leaving the barracks to explore Hawaii, the guy's on an island, a tropical paradise where people fight to get these orders.
I was going to say that's one of the best postings in the Army, right?
Yeah, in the military
Or in the
general,
military, period.
Gosh, what I would give to be stationed in Hawaii. Kendall preferred staying indoors. He liked playing Magic the Gathering and other card games, just hung out in the barracks. He watched a lot of TV and movies. Soldiers recalled Kendall never had a girlfriend or really seemed interested in women, during their time in the Army. After 4 years in the Army, Kendall was discharged due to his weight, which had climbed to over 300 pounds. Kendall returned to New York and moved in with his parents. He enrolled at Dutchess Community College, where he would take classes kind of on and off for the next 4 years, but would never actually complete a degree. He might take a semester of classes, then skip 2 semesters, and then go back to school. He never really had the follow through, it seems like, to finish anything.
Well, yeah, and people don't finish college, even, community college for various reasons. But, sometimes people get really close and they just I've never quite understood that,
Well, Kendall would tell people his ambition was to be a science teacher, but he never put forth enough effort to get through even the community college courses.
Well, I was going to say he's been dressing like a science teacher his whole school career.
Pretty much.
With the khakis and the sweater vest.
Yes.
Button-ups.
Turtlenecks.
Yeah.
Yes. Kendall worked as a custodian for Arlington schools from May of 1994 to April of 1996. He was then promoted to a school detention monitor from April 96 until January of 1997. So during this time, Kendall was referred to as Stinky by the students. They all talked about his smell, his scent, his odor. Teachers noted Kendall had inappropriate behavior with students. He was always wrestling with the kids. He would pull the female students' hair and always seemed to try engaging in conversation with these 13-year-old girls. Now, there was nothing ever I guess it never went beyond that, but teachers thought it was weird.
Well, look, connecting with the kids is one thing, but we all know or have been around a person who it's just something, it doesn't seem right about it. You know what I mean? It's almost like they're maybe a little emotionally immature, and they're kind of trying to be friends with
Yes.
instead of just being a teacher and a student.
Earning $6 an hour, Kendall lived at home with his parents, so money wasn't really that important. He made just enough to kind of do what he wanted to do. Didn't really seem to have any goals beyond living at home with his parents and working a minimum wage job. Others at the school described him as being mild-mannered and quiet. He spent his weekends at a local comic book store engaging in role-playing games like Magic the Gathering and D&D. He also would play cards with some of the guys from his community college. In 1997, Kendall took a job at the Anderson School, which serves students with disabilities. After a few months, he was let go for unknown reasons.
Uh-oh.
When Kendall returned to Poughkeepsie, back after the discharge from the Army, Dylan, he began soliciting sex workers. Soon, Kendall had earned a reputation for being unclean and smelly, but also because he would rough up the women. And he was huge in size, which was physically painful for many of the sex workers because he weighed over 300 pounds. So
Okay.
he's a really big guy.
Look, we got a lot to unpack here. If I'm a sex worker, I'm sorry. I'm gonna keep my drug. If I am on drugs, I'm not saying you have to be, but I probably would be. Let's be honest, because I have drug issues in the past. I'm gonna have my standards at least high enough to where you got to be a little bit clean. You know what I'm saying? Now, could you imagine?
Well, you say that, but if you were like regularly using crack and you were addicted to crack or heroin, you might feel differently about that $20 that you need.
I could not imagine having to be with somebody stinky.
No. Major turnoff.
I would be like, I'm a pass, bro. I'm passing. Okay.
So not only was he huge in size, he's a big guy, 6'4", teetering between, at this point, like more than 300 pounds. Some sources said between 350 to 400 pounds.
Yeah.
So he's physically crushing a lot of these women who are addicts. Therefore, they are frail. They, weigh like 100, 120 pounds. They're very tiny women. And not only that, Dylan, but they described him as being girthy too. And I don't want to be gross, but Kendall was packing some.
So his nickname was Peter Steele.
He was packing some poundage in his pants.
So, but and he's not. Sometimes a big guy like that is extra careful about not like say, crushing you or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like he doesn't really care about that.
No. So it was physically painful for many of these women to have sex with him. And if they would complain, that's when Kendall would rough them up. But despite this, he was a regular customer for many of these women that were working Main Street in Poughkeepsie.
Yeah. Heather, I just had a great idea for a movie right quick.
Do I want to add?
In the middle of your story.
Maybe you should just not tell us.
I'm gonna. So, right. You've been telling us all these crime stories all these years. And like the big reveal, the big M. Night Shyamalan twist is one day I happen to see your computer screen and it's blank. And you've really just been telling me about people that you've killed. Ooh. From memory.
Well, Dylan, given the fact that we have the internet and we can research.
Right.
Like, let me look. I want to find out more about this case.
Yeah.
That wouldn't work.
Because you could research it?
Well, because our listeners would be able to look into it.
But it would work for me because I would never look into it.
Oh, I believe that.
Okay.
So you're saying you never look into anything we talk about?
No, that's not true. That's... No, I do. Look, I do.
You're such a liar. You won't even remember this case in 2 days.
I'm telling you, I try my best. I try my best to remember it. I have to live in the moment.
Oh, my gosh.
All right, I'm sorry.
On October 24th of 1996, 30-year-old Wendy Myers was last seen at the Valley Rest Motel on Main Street. Wendy lived at a different motel with her boyfriend, which was across the river, and Wendy was in active addiction. Kendall took Wendy to his parents' home on Fulton Avenue, where they engaged in unprotected sex. Kendall would later say that Wendy had, quote, ripped him off in the past, and he didn't want to get ripped off again. Like, she would take his money and then refuse to have sex with him.
Oh, she'd take the money and run.
Yes. Once they were in Kendall's room, Wendy started complaining. She said she had a probation appointment and needed to leave, But because Kendall had paid for sex, he was expecting a follow-through. So he gets pretty angry with Wendy. He began strangling her, and she fought back. Once she fell unconscious, but she wasn't dead yet, Kendall carried her to the bathroom, which was the only, and this was like an upstairs bathroom next to his bedroom, because it was the only bathroom in the house that had running water. And he placed her face, kind of face down in the bathtub until she drowned.
Oh my gosh.
Afterwards, he placed her body in the attic.
Okay. Now, that's so scary. You know, here you have this person you've interacted with before. It might not be your favorite client, but, you know, it's whatever. And now it's gone, you know, you never imagined it would go this far. And now you're dead at the hands of this big smelly guy.
Yes.
In a house that has plumbing in disrepair.
Yes.
That is also creepy.
Well, we'll talk more about the house. Now, Kendall had been diagnosed with HIV, and this was after his first encounter with Wendy Myers almost a year earlier. Like, he kind of met her in 1995 and started having sex with her unprotected. Pretty quickly contracted HIV, and it turns out she was HIV positive. So they're pretty sure he probably got it from Wendy.
Oh, my gosh.
A month later, Kendall picked up 29-year-old Gina Barone in his 1986 red Subaru. It was a cold fall night on November 29th of 1996. Kendall had dealt with Gina before, and he would later say he thought Gina was ugly, rude, and usually too high. Every time they'd had an encounter in the past, Gina would complain about Kendall's weight and that he was taking too long. You know what I mean?
She's trying to maximize her profit margins.
She always talked incessantly about how she needed to go get high. Like, so hurry up, I gotta go get high.
I could see that taken away from the moment a little bit.
On this particular evening, Gina had a fight with her boyfriend, Richie. And this was maybe around like 2 or 3 a.m. He had given her $10 to buy heroin, and she'd bought crack instead. So this seemed to be the reason for the fight. About a week later, Richie showed up at Patricia Barone's house to ask if she knew where her daughter was. Richie hadn't seen Gina in days. Now, Patricia was accustomed to her daughter disappearing and then reappearing. The single mother had moved her only daughter, Gina, to Poughkeepsie back in 1978 when she was 10 years old. Gina was considered a quiet, shy kid, but by the time she reached junior high, Gina had fallen in with a bad crowd. Her mother considered her to be out of control and didn't really know what to do with her. By 16, Gina had dropped out of school and was doing sex work, spending the cash on drugs. Gina bounced around from house to house. She would live with friends. By the time she was 21, Gina completely moved out of her mother's house and started living with a boyfriend. Patricia recalled that her daughter moved between like 10 to 12 times after this. I mean, just no stability.
And that, it doesn't sound fun, and it's just, it's sad. It sounds like a sad existence, and I feel bad for her.
When Gina was 26, she turned up pregnant. She had a daughter named Nicole who lived with Patricia, with the grandmother. So, according to Kendall, Gina Barone was complaining in the back seat of the Subaru. She was trying to get out of having sex with him. Having been ripped off by her before, Kendall grew annoyed and started strangling her. It took about 3 minutes before she passed out. That's when Kendall raped her until she woke up screaming. Then he strangled her for about 6 more minutes until she went limp. Kendall then drove to his parents' home where he tossed Gina's body in the garage and covered it up with an old mattress and just left it there for a while.
My God. So, you know, he keeps, I've been ripped, they ripped me off. He's making excuses.
Yes.
He's done this thing.
I agree.
The first time.
He's trying to rationalize or justify it.
He's already been, he wasn't afraid to be violent with women. That seems to be like second nature for him. This great, big, hulking man, stinky boy. And he enjoys this. He's figured out that he enjoys taking this all the way, if you will. And he's
sitting there smelling like ass.
Smelling like the inside of a fake leg.
Ew.
Yeah. And I don't know.
How do you know what the inside of a fake leg smells like?
I used to work with a guy another guy I worked with. That's what he always said about him, and we're all pretty sure that's what the inside of a fake leg smells.
Did he had a fake leg?
No.
Oh.
He just smelled like ass.
Because that could be offensive to people with a prosthetic leg. Maybe they're really clean and they Clorox their leg. I don't approve of this message.
Maybe we should take that out.
Let's just move along. No, I want everybody to know that you're a piece of crap.
Well, this would be an old, like a pirate leg, not modern day prosthetics, like a peg leg.
Now you're backpedaling.
Well, yeah, I've
you
got
know what?
to.
We're canceling you, Dylan.
Oh,
you're going to have to delete your Twitter.
I canceled myself years ago.
Days later, Kendall picked up Catherine Marsh. Catherine had grown up in a middle-class family who, took trips to Europe. Her father was principal at an elementary school. Marguerite Marsh had struggled for years to have a child, so the Marshes adopted Marie, and then 10 years later, Margaret was surprised when she got pregnant. Kathy was premature. She weighed only about 4 pounds, and they weren't even sure she would survive. Kathy's childhood was considered normal, but her father passed away when he was quite young. He had a heart attack, and she took this particularly hard. She was really close with her dad. By 12, Kathy was drinking alcohol in her bedroom. Marguerite began noticing bottles in the liquor cabinet would be emptied out. Kathy was also getting paid for sex acts, which her mother did not learn about until later. So at 12, she's drinking and performing sex acts for money.
That's scary.
Kathy's drinking was out of control. She did manage to graduate from high school and enrolled at a state university. Marguerite had hoped that Kathy's fresh start at college, maybe making new friends, getting out of Poughkeepsie, out of that area would kind of help her. But Kathy hated college. She felt lonely. Just after starting school, she showed up at her mom's house, saying she just wanted to spend the weekend at home and sleep in her bed. At this time, Marguerite had plans to go on a vacation and agreed to leave Kathy there alone. When she returned from the trip, a couple of weeks later, Kathy was still there. She had dropped out of school, saying instead she was going to enroll at the community college and live at home. But her uncle determined that Kathy had not even registered for classes at the community college at all, and she'd just been lying for weeks.
Unc's going to figure this stuff out.
Not only was Kathy drinking, but she also started using drugs, specifically cocaine. She did go to work at a gas station when she moved back home, but her mom said her entire paycheck went to buy cocaine. Then Kathy started getting into trouble for selling drugs and solicitation. Margaret paid for rehab, quote, so many times, that she forgot how many times her daughter went to rehab. Kathy had 2 children with unknown fathers. The last time Marguerite spoke to her daughter, Kathy claimed she was living in a car. Kathy, pregnant with her 3rd child, begged her mother to come home. She was asking, please let me come home. But due to the lies and years of mistrust, Marguerite told her no. 4 months later, on March 7th of 1997, Marguerite reported her daughter missing.
See, and that is such a tough story, and I don't blame her mom. But that's got to be hard, But when you lie and cheat and steal from people you love and know and things like that, it's such a wrong thing to do. And it hurts people deeply. And I don't blame her for saying, no, enough of this. I'm going to protect myself, my home, my sanctity. And I'm not going to allow this.
Loved ones feel guilty for exercising that tough love a lot of times. And especially if something happens, she had no way of knowing Kathy would become a victim of a violent crime. So I'm sure she feels incredibly guilty about telling her no. But at the same time, you're not responsible for other people's behavior. And if someone's burned that bridge, you can't save them. You can't fix them. Only they can help themselves,
Exactly. You can't make people get help or get better. Only they can do it for themselves. And stealing and just outright lying and cheating your loved ones is a very shitty thing to do.
Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of times when we talk about addiction, and I get, it's a disease, but I feel like these days there's no accountability or personal responsibility when it comes to addiction. As a society, we want to, poor you.
You have no control.
You have no control. even though no one made you do this, you made a decision to do this. And yes, you can be predisposed to addiction, genetically or whatever, but you made the choice to do this. No one made you do it. And there's got to be some level of personal responsibility and accountability when we talk about addiction. And I just feel like we don't anymore.
No.
And then on top of that, it gets glossed over the way addicts treat their fucking families. And every time I see a video online or something of, addicts in Portland or wherever, people in the comments like, that's someone's daughter. Or, oh God, that's someone's mom. How could you post this? And I always think, yeah, that's someone's daughter who's probably fucked over her parents, has probably stolen from them, ruined their lives, made their life a fucking living hell for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
And has done everything possible to fuck over everybody who's ever tried to help them.
And has had 100 chances to do better.
But then we're supposed to be like, oh, poor you. And I say this having come from a family where we had addicts, and I have been personally affected by the addicts in my family.
Like
I have been stolen from.
You got some addicts out in the backyard. No, you're right.
So it's like coming, from a place of I've a lot of addicts in my family, and I've personally been affected by them and screwed over by them, and I've seen how they've destroyed my family and spent money that people didn't have, and bankrupted my grandparents or whatever to try to help them. I have strong feelings about it, and I think I'm justified, and it's validated because I've lived it.
Well, I agree.
So
and I think people, I think people can tell that you have strong feeling, but I think you're right, and that doesn't mean you don't want to help someone.
No,
but we got to get rid of this. It's a disease. You have absolutely no control. Blah 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 stuff, and this is coming from folks. If you've listened for any amount of time, I'm an addict right now. Okay, I'm addicting right now. No, I've had issues. But I've never went all the way down the road because you just like to get high. Your disease element of it or your predisposition is your brain chemistry works in a certain way. You enjoy being fucked up. That's what you need to admit to yourself, and everyone should talk about more than anything. You like to get high so much, you will screw over relatives. You will
abandon your kids.
You have grandparents raising kids. We have a whole generation.
You have kids with strangers. You don't even know who your baby daddy is because you're, sex working on the street
or blackout sex because you're using the substance.
Yeah.
All these things, and you just kept going down that path, and down that path is so many times you keep making choices to keep going down the wrong way to when you end up nowhere to live, no money, nobody will talk with you. You've screwed all your family over. I mean, you made choices so many times at a fork in the road, and you never turned back. And it's sad, but we got to quit with the, oh my gosh, poor them, because they did this they did this.
Well,
actively.
And I understand like family feeling some kind of guilt if they turn away their loved one and don't offer them help for the umpteenth time, and then something tragic happens. They feel guilty, and I understand you love this person, you want to do what's best for them, but you really shouldn't have any guilt because you've done everything in your power. If you've done everything you can to try to help and save this person and they don't want to be saved, then you shouldn't feel guilty about that.
No, you should.
So I guess that's what I was trying to say here, not so eloquently 10 minutes later.
There you go.
After I ranted and raved.
But, at the same time, you can decide to stop doing that. And you can get better. Many people are doing it every day.
It's true. Recovery is possible.
It is possible. And then you get to be just...
But it's a choice. Like everything, it's a choice.
It really is.
You can choose to do this thing.
You can choose to do it. You can choose not to do it. And you know what? Do that. Because you will, no matter what substance it is that you've been doing a lot of or too much of or whatever, or the feels that you cover up and you don't want to feel, I can also tell you this. Feel those feelings. Deal with it. Grow. Get new tools in your mental toolbox to help you deal with whatever you're covering up. Because you do like getting fucked up. That's part of it. But you're also covering something up and you're not dealing with it a lot of times. And you'll feel better in the end. You will.
Thanks, Dylan.
I should be a counselor. Okay.
Well, you could. I can't. I'm too brutally honest, and people don't like it.
Well, I could. Well, yeah.
I don't sugarcoat it. Now, Kendall would tell law enforcement that he had met Kathy Marsh outside Soldier's Fountain, which was a place where people went to pay their cable bills.
At Soldier's Fountain?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Look, I don't live in Poughkeepsie. I don't know. He had offered her $20 for sex and was surprised that she accepted such a low amount of money. Kendall took Kathy to his childhood bedroom and proceeded to strangle her on the Mickey Mouse comforter.
This guy, he is a full-blown monster.
Kendall said she didn't fight back at all and just laid there like she was accepting her fate or had expected this to happen. He would say, quote, "I was probably pissed off at someone else. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." After he strangled Kathy, he placed her in the bathtub to drown her just to make sure she was dead. Kendall would tell police, quote, "Killing people is harder than I thought. It's not like in the movies where they die in a minute or two."
Well, yeah, he's doing manual strangulation. I mean, it's a very drawn out, and I'm sure more than once he probably thought the person maybe
With his big meat hook hands.
Yeah, was big lunch boxes, but he probably thought they were dead, and then they kind of gassed, came to, if you will, and he had to strangle them again. I mean, it's a very intimate, up close and personal thing. Strangling someone and literally watching the light go out of their eyes. Could you imagine?
No. I don't wanna.
I don't want to see that.
Patricia Barone had already filed like a missing persons report on Gina. Police hadn't exactly rushed out with an all points bulletin. Law enforcement had their hands tied. There were no bodies, no crime scenes, and these missing women were leading high-risk lifestyles that often involved disappearing for days or weeks on end. The police department also didn't have a lot of funding to dedicate to searches because, again, this is like an impoverished area. A lot of the good jobs had moved out. So they don't have money to set up, big searches or anything like that.
And that's the horrible cycle that starts in a place like this. Once the jobs go, the tax base depletes, and city. And one of the first things affected are city services. But it's like we give cops shit about not taking people seriously, or just because someone has used drugs or solicited or been a sex worker, they don't pay them attention. But at the same time, this is a person with a transient lifestyle who's known, if they did go asking questions, people are like, well, hell, I don't see them for months at a time. And then they pop up out of nowhere.
Or their associates are people who don't talk to police.
Yes.
Who are not going to offer up information.
Yes. And so even if the cops did hit the ground running, they probably wouldn't get very far. So, I mean, it's a tricky situation.
Well, Dylan, you're right, because this is my next paragraph. Girls on the streets had already complained to police about being manhandled by this big dirty guy named Kendall. Multiple women reported being raped or attacked by Kendall Francois, yet the majority refused to file charges against him or go to the hospital for a rape kit or any kind of physical examination. Without any evidence and this refusal to cooperate, law enforcement wasn't really able to do their job. By the time Kathy Marsh was missing or reported missing, Kendall had already murdered 2 more women, 47-year-old Kathleen Hurley and a 29-year-old nurse's aide named Mary Healy Giacone. Hurley was the only victim who didn't have any solicitation charges, but her family said she did dabble kind of on and off, like in sex work, I guess when she needed the money. In April of 1997, detectives were given permission to speak with the press regarding the missing women. The Poughkeepsie Beat published an article, and this article mentioned how law enforcement theorized they could be hunting another serial killer who was preying on the city's sex work. Public reaction was minimal. No one seemed to care. The media's reaction to the story was almost zero. The daily newspaper, the Poughkeepsie Journal, didn't even pick up the story.
Now, that's kind of weird, because usually when they go so far as to actually have a press conference or, publicly announce they feel like they may have these connected murderers, a lot of times it causes kind of a sensation.
Well, and I say another serial killer preying on the city sex workers because just a few years before, we'll talk more about it in a minute, there was a a serial killer preying on sex workers in the Hudson Valley. On top of it, we have Arthur Shawcross. We've covered him on the podcast. Serial killer who was kind of working, this area, like the Rochester area, known for killing sex workers. And we had Joel Rifkin down in New York City.
Oh, so are people kind of had a serial killer glut at this point?
Well, there were just quite a few in the 90s in this area. But no one seemed to care. I mean, the media is not even really paying attention to it. The community doesn't seem outraged. There's no outcry. Detective Seacrest said, quote, "We were agonizing what to do with the public. Do we go public and create a scare or keep going with the investigation without letting the public know? Law enforcement doesn't always have the answers." It wasn't until August of 1997 that law enforcement even announced they had a task force working the cases. And this is despite the fact that the task force had been working on these cases for months. They finally made it public. But again, it doesn't seem like anybody cares.
The whole community's like, meh.
Pretty much.
That's wild.
So Mary wasn't reported missing until November 13th of 1997. And that's when her mother passed away. The family didn't hear from her. They had not heard from her since February, and they thought something was wrong because she's not showing up for her mom's funeral. They can't get in touch with her to let her know her mother's passed away. And they felt like that was abnormal. Like she would want to be there for the funeral. A pattern was emerging of these missing women in Poughkeepsie. They were all petite, thin, dark, they all had dark hair, and most of them were sex workers and known addicts. But they all very much so fit a profile.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they're all like 5'1", 5'2", 5'3", and weigh like 100 pounds, less than 120 pounds. I mean, they're all like very tiny women. And think about that compared to this 6'4", nearly 400-pound guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they don't stand a chance.
No. Detective Bill Seacrest began looking into these missing persons cases more deeply. And he noticed that there seemed to be kind of this lull from spring into summer. And then fall starts to maybe kind of be a little more active. So there's a definite cooling off period. And no one wanted to admit that there might be a serial killer preying on sex workers. Like the police department doesn't really want to admit this. And so they're not really sure what's happening. But just a few years earlier, Hudson Valley had dealt with a serial killer named Nathaniel White who had murdered 6 women. He was inspired by a scene in RoboCop 2 and murdered the first woman in 1991. This was after he had already been convicted of abducting a 16-year-old girl, which he served less than a year in prison for that crime and was immediately, once he was released, immediately went and murdered someone because he watched RoboCop 2.
I'm trying to think what scene this is. My gosh. But see, there you go. You have a violent, kidnapping's violent.
Yeah.
Snatching someone, forcing them to go against their will and that's one of the reasons it's a very serious charge. That's how you quickly get into federal charges and the FBI investigating things like that. But once again, they had a chance to put this person who's done this very violent thing toward women away for a while, less than a year.
As part of his investigation, Seacrest spoke with officers who were involved with the Neighborhood Recovery Unit, which was like a vice squad dedicated mostly to narcotics. Those officers reported back that the Main Street sex workers had been complaining about a guy named Kendall Francois. Now, in the meantime, Kendall had allowed Gina Barone's body to lay in the garage for months. When his parents began discussing a fallen tree that had damaged the garage and how they needed to get this repaired or have something done about this tree, that's when Kendall decided to place her in the attic with Wendy and Kathy.
So I'm trying to figure out how you can just have these bodies laying around and no one be like, hey, does somebody smell a body?
I'm going to give you some answers in a minute.
Because
I'm waiting to spring this on you, Dylan.
That's leading me to believe that this is maybe not the cleanest area,
Just
yard,
wait.
house, everything.
Just wait.
Oh my God.
Detective Segrist began surveillance on Francois, staking out the house on Fulton Avenue and sort of following him around town, even though they didn't really have money to dedicate to like 24-hour surveillance. He was kind of just doing this periodically. They watched him pick up sex workers from Main Street, but little useful information was gathered during this time. They were able to establish Kendall's routine. Every morning, he got up and drove his mother to work at a nearby psychiatric center. Then he would cruise the streets looking for sex workers, and he did this during the daytime hours when his parents were at work, when no one was at home.
So he can take them back to his bedroom and kill them.
To his childhood bedroom with the Mickey Mouse sheets, yes.
I bet those sheets were something else.
Detective Segrist had an idea to, he had this informant who was also a sex worker. Her name was Katina Newmaster. And he got this idea that maybe he could get Katina to wear a wire and speak to Kendall. And he was, pretty specific about, you wear the wire, I want you to like lean in the car, talk to him, but don't get in the car and go with him.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So she did this, but it really didn't lead anywhere. I mean, the conversation was pretty casual. They didn't get any, smoking gun evidence or anything like that. In early January of 1998, Kendall was driving his mother to work while police tailed him. Once Paulette was dropped off, Kendall was pulled over by law enforcement. They asked if he would come down to the police station, and he didn't ask any questions, and he agreed to follow the patrol car down to the station. Now, once inside the interview room, detectives said, quote, "We'd like to talk to you about the missing women." Kendall listened intently, then told police officers that none of the names, as they're telling him who these missing women are, he's like, "Oh, none of those names ring a bell. I don't know what you're talking about." He never admitted to having sex with prostitutes and just clammed up, didn't really offer up any information. When detectives asked if he would be willing to submit to a polygraph, he agreed to do it.
Oh.
He called their bluff because the thing is, the Poughkeepsie Police Department, they didn't have like a full-time polygraph examiner. They didn't have funding for that.
It's just a guy named Earl who does it on the weekends.
They didn't have any of that. So Kendall would have to consent to go to the state police barracks for the exam. And he was like, okay, we'll do that. The only catch was Kendall wanted to stop by his house on Fulton Avenue first. Detectives agreed, hoping that they would be able to get a sneak peek inside the home. Once they arrived, Detective Manon followed Kendall into the house. Kendall told him that his parents didn't really like visitors, so he was like, "You have to stay with me and don't touch anything." So the detective was like, okay. Once they entered into the home, the stench hit him. Manon, who was a bachelor, was considered like a neat freak by those who knew him. His home was immaculate and inspection ready, likely from his time in the Marine Corps. He could not believe the condition of the home.
Oh my gosh.
The house had not been vacuumed in probably 20 years, the detective speculated. There were inches of black muck on the linoleum floors. Trash littered the house. There was urine and feces everywhere. I don't know if it was human or animal.
Does it matter?
No. I don't know.
Honestly, I don't. I think it's. Hey, I think poop is poop. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I don't want to walk by. I know that's my dad's turd laying there.
Well, I don't know if it being my dad's turd would affect me any worse than a pile of dog or cat poo or pee everywhere. But I'm sorry.
Well, if an animal, okay. It doesn't make it any better, Dylan, but I'm just saying
it's going to be worse.
If a dog hunkers up and takes a big dump in the floor, that's an animal. They don't know any better. But if your mom is over in the corner just taking a
squat
shit in the living room,
yeah,
that's not okay.
That's going to be worse. You're right. That's a good distinction, Heather. You're over there spraying your mom with a spray bottle in the face, talking about bad mom.
I'm smacking my mom with a newspaper.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be mean, but I just don't understand. I don't understand how anyone would live like this.
I don't either.
It's not good. It's not healthy in so many ways, physically and mentally, to live in. This is squalor.
Dude, it's disgusting. The kitchen was piled up with dirty dishes, old food. There were roaches everywhere, maggots. Yeah. So the detective follows Kendall to his bedroom, which was equally as disgusting. He noticed dirty clothes piled up, rotting food, used condoms were just all over the floor, and the smell was nearly unbearable. When Kendall had taken a break from killing, it was mostly due to a storage problem. He was running out of room in the attic, and the smell was also drawing notice from his parents, who asked what was going on. Kendall told his father, McKinley, that a family of raccoons had died in the attic and that he was working on getting the smell under control.
So his parents are smelling this new smell over top of the house smell that's been developing for years.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I don't even know what to say. I mean, I don't. See, the fact that...
Well, here's the thing, Dylan. I kept trying to gather more information about this house. One, I wanted to see some pictures of the house, like the inside, and I wasn't really able to find any good pictures of the house.
You could taste this house if you were walking through it.
I was trying to find more information. Like, is someone in this house a hoarder?
Yeah.
Like, is that the problem?
Well, I mean, obviously
Just
it sounds...
hoarding.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like they were hoarding... Like how, when you watch the show Hoarders, people hoard stuff, right? Like
typically
new stuff. But
trash.
This is just like they were hoarding like trash and turds.
Well, this is like it's just very not clean.
Like no one's cleaned this house.
No one cares.
Which would explain why the kids were never allowed to have guests.
Well, see now. Oh yeah, I remember you saying that. Now that leads you to believe that they know that their house isn't normal, even if it's subconsciously, and they don't discuss it. And that's why they just rather not have to ever explain themselves to anyone else. And therefore, you don't typically have friends, family. Your kids don't invite people over.
This would also explain why their oldest child, Raquel, grew up living with relatives and didn't live with her parents.
Yes.
She didn't want to live there. And the older brother, Aubrey, no longer lived at home, and it sounds like he was like the sister and sort of spent a lot of time away from the family home.
It's sad, but it's gross too, man. And I feel bad for these people, but I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you lay down around stuff like this and go to sleep or get out of the shower and try to,
it doesn't sound like anybody's taking a shower. They only have the one working bathroom, it sounds like. And Kendall's not showering.
Damn.
Because he stank.
And that's what, you're going to have sex with that guy for $40 or $50?
20.
20?
10, 20. Yeah.
I would charge so much more than that. I would be top shelf if I was on the street.
Well, I'm not having sex with somebody who stinks. I'm sorry.
How about, look, when you wash that ass...
I don't know how much money you offer me, but it ain't happening.
You're going to have to use a condom.
Look, I'm just grossed out by people in general.
Right.
And I guess maybe I've just been married to you for too long, but the thought of having to go out in the world and be single and like maybe have sex with strangers is so... I can't even think about that right now. I would just not. I would just be celibate from the rest of my life.
You could experience new smells.
No, I don't want to. See, that grosses me out. Like I've almost developed like this weird phobia. I don't want people to see me naked.
No.
Okay, I don't like my middle-aged body. I'm not trying to be naked in front of somebody.
I love seeing you naked.
Ain't nobody going to be able to rub on my fupa.
I would not be. Look, here's the deal, folks. I love you.
I don't want to smell somebody else.
And you're the only person I really am in love with you, and you're the only person I'd ever want to be naked around or comfortable or, smelling you.
Is that why you're sitting here naked right now?
I'm not. I have clothes on.
It's really distracting.
This is why we can't do any video for the podcast, folks, because I podcast naked.
No, you don't.
I don't. Sometimes in my underwear, though.
But not right now. You actually put on pants to podcast today. I was proud of you.
I felt sophisticated. I felt metropolitan.
You were walking around in
today.
your underwear, and then you're like putting on pants. I'm like, you going somewhere? And you're like, no, I'm going to record the podcast. And I was like, oh, you're pantsing up for it. That's
so
great.
I wasn't cold because we have this air vent that blows right up at my legs there. But no, I don't want to be with anyone else, and I couldn't imagine being around anyone else. That would be so uncomfortable and almost scary.
You're not going to take $20 to have sex with somebody who stinks, Dylan? You could buy a pack of cigarettes with that $20.
I'm addicted to cigarettes. That's what's got me out here living this life on the streets.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm a nicotine addict.
Well, yeah, because you can't afford them.
That's true.
In today's world.
That's why I had to quit them. Yeah.
Detective Mannon, I mean, he was just completely like beside himself and just shocked at the condition of this house. It was like nothing he'd ever seen. Yet Kendall Francois passed that polygraph exam with flying colors, Dylan.
That doesn't surprise me.
According to the exam, Kendall wasn't a suspect. But Detective Segrist and Detective Mannon, they kind of knew otherwise. They were like, yeah, we don't know if we believe that test.
Well, yeah, and look, a sociopath, a psychopath can go into a polygraph, cool as a cucumber, and not get disturbed by any of the questions, knowing damn well that it's the truth.
Well, the detectives knew that.
Yeah, and anyone that knows anything about polygraphs knows that. So, and polygraphs they're good, and I really think their best value is just asking someone whether or not they'll take one.
Have you ever noticed when we're recording, that's when Rufus decides he's going to click-clack his little toes, little toenails all over the floor, and he's going to get next to the microphone and shake or scratch or something.
But really, it's just the idea of the polygraph is an effective tool for cops, I think. Way more so than the polygraph itself.
I don't need a polygraph. I always know when you lying.
I'll never take a polygraph.
But I always know when I'm like a polygraph. I know when you lying.
Well, that's because we're on the same frequency.
That's because your lips are moving.
That's so funny.
It's true.
So funny I forgot to laugh.
You lie about the dumbest shit. That's what gets me. You do. You admit it. It'll just be some dumb shit that I'm like, why would you even lie? Like, you're going to risk having a big fight over this dumb little thing that you've lied about?
We don't have to fight about it.
Well, we do, because I don't like being lied to. You damn lie.
Let's move on about this smelly serial killer.
Yeah.
Let's finish the story.
Okay. Well, that's because I'm married to a smelly liar.
Now, I'm a clean liar. You know it.
Well, I'm married to this clean liar who's got a funky toe. Now, Segrist wanted a search warrant for the Francois home. At this point, he's very curious about what's going on in this house.
Gosh, they're probably pulling short straws to see who has to actually search this house, man. It's so gross.
So when he takes this to the district attorney to try to figure out what they need to do to obtain a search warrant, they're basically told they need to get a fresh complaint against Kendall. Like if one of the prostitutes who've been attacked will come forward, like if any new developments happen,
right?
Someone comes forward, that kind of thing. So shortly after this interview, Kendall gets rid of that Subaru.
Oh.
That he's been driving. Now, he didn't sell it. He gets rid of the plates. He gets rid of the car. They don't really know how he disposed of this car.
It's just gone.
It's gone. He bought a new Toyota Camry. Back in October, on the day that a woman named Michelle Eason had gone missing. By the way, she was the only black victim. She was last seen getting into a red Subaru. The red Subaru, was illegally parked at a doctor's office. Kendall was told that he needed to move the car, which he did. He then illegally parked it on Fulton Avenue in a no parking zone. After 3 days of being issued tickets, the car was towed and impounded. On October 31st of 1997, Kendall retrieved the car from the impound. The car, a treasure trove of evidence, then disappeared. But at the time, law enforcement were not allowed to search it simply because of these parking tickets. But had they would have probably found all kinds of shit in there.
Oh my gosh.
Because he was having sex with a lot of these women in the car.
Well, he's not a clean person, so he's not cleaning his car out probably either.
No. And it's actually been said that there were like used condoms in the car, and he would put his mom in the car and drive her to work. And she never really said anything about these used condoms being like all over the seats and stuff.
Look.
I know. It's totally gross.
It's one of the grossest things you described was who keeps used condoms around? Because they're so gross. They're so gross and like sticky and like.
Just stop.
Oh my God.
On January 23rd of 1998, Laura Gallagher was approached by Kendall Francois, and she knew him. Kendall smelled terrible and was often rough with women. She knew this, but money was money, crack was crack. She got into his car. Kendall drove Gallagher to his parents' home on Fulton Avenue. Completely disgusted by the house and the smell, Gallagher immediately starts complaining. She doesn't want to be there, and who would blame her? Nobody wants to be in this nasty ass house. But then she starts complaining about his weight and his girth during sex. Kendall grew angry, putting his massive hands around her throat. However, she fought him off. According to Laura, she started her monthly flow, and this bothered Kendall. So he decided not to kill her. Instead, she was able to get a ride back to Main Street. Through the grapevine, Laura's experience kind of got somehow passed around until members of the Vice Squad heard about it. Detective Manon, after hearing the story, decided to track Laura down and interview her. She was brought into the station where she gave a deposition of the incident. However, Laura was bleeding through her pants during the interview and was like growing anxious and ready to leave. So she didn't sign the statement. And it took some days for the detectives to track her down to get her signature on this deposition.
My gosh.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, I wrestled with, do I even want to bring this up? But, you know.
Well, I mean, I think it's her period saved her life.
I mean, it sounds like it did.
Isn't that amazing? See, women's bodies are fascinating.
Well, I'll trade you. Now, once she signs this statement, they are able to arrest Kendall for simple assault.
So now they have the new complaint.
Yes.
And they're just itching. They're just dying to get a look at this guy's house and stuff. So here they finally have what they need to get a search warrant.
Detectives were unable to secure a search warrant, though. Kendall immediately lawyered up when he was arrested. Laura Gallagher wasn't exactly knocking down the doors of law enforcement to pursue the case. Detectives knew that the case against Kendall was shaky at best. Kendall's lawyer told detectives to stay away from the Francois home and that all questions should be routed through him. Kendall was granted bail due to the nature of the charge. It was just a simple assault. So he's right back out on the street. And law enforcement was told, like, you need to tread lightly.
Oh, almost being accused of harassing him already.
Yes.
Wow.
Kendall appeared in court on May 18th of 1998 on the assault charge, which was pled down to a misdemeanor, third-degree assault. He was given 15 days in jail, served 7 days, and was back out on the street. Well, so again, Dylan, when folks want to point the finger at law enforcement, like you're not doing enough, even when they're able to make an arrest, the justice system isn't doing enough because these people are able to usually plea down to a lesser charge and get this minimum sentence for the crime. And they're just allowed to be back out on the street to repeat over and over. I mean, we see this time and time again. Yeah,
it's almost like, so you get even the most minor charge, you can almost guarantee they will, plead it down to something else. And I don't get that. I think that should be strictly case by case. Like, hey, once you hear the nuts and bolts of this particular assault, this sounds worse than some people got in an argument or, things, went too far. People were both using a substance and they got in a fight, some silly, goofy stuff they see all the time. This sounds worse. This sounds a lot worse. If a judge and anyone hears in the courtroom that this woman went there, they agreed to a transaction for sex, if you will. You got to get past that. That's a lot of times around this type of thing, sex work and stuff. People just can't get past two adults deciding to exchange money for sex. It's really not that big of a deal, folks. I don't think so. I think if people want to do it, it's your body. You know what I'm saying? It's your body. You can sell it.
You don't have to justify your desire to sell your body to me.
I sell my body to you.
I'm saying you don't have to justify it.
No, but I'm saying that's not a big deal, But it's like people can never, they don't even want to talk about it, And they just plea everything down. And it's like you see in the courtrooms, it just seems it's lazy. On a day-to-day basis, they don't want to go through the motions of actually looking into the case and stuff. Things just get, and it's like violence towards women should get a particular, a really good look at. I mean, it should be under a microscope because how many times in the stories that you've told all these years could that have been an early warning that, hey, this person something's wrong? We see an escalation from the last, years ago, you did this and you did this, and it's escalating and it just keeps going. And it's not like just sometimes. It's like they always let these pieces of shit out. They always give them a slap on the wrist. And it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I think a lot of us feel that way.
I'm sure all you women do.
Well, detectives realize that like 70% of murder victims know they're killers, and they also know that sociopaths, likely Kendall Francois being one, exhibit this antisocial behavior and that they have no problem violating the rights of others. Oftentimes they fail to plan ahead, which would make sense for someone like Kendall and how he ended up piling these bodies up in his house because he didn't really think ahead of how am I going to dispose of these bodies.
Well, but he doesn't need to. I mean, you know what I'm saying? He's got multiple bodies just kind of thrown around like trash, and no one's saying anything. He hasn't been caught yet. Like, I would be thinking if I had one body to get rid of, that's all I could think about because I'm thinking that's not going to last. It's going to deteriorate. It's going to start smelling. Someone's going to figure me out.
Well, again, he doesn't think ahead. Like, he's not concerned about those things. He also has no empathy for these women, which makes it easy for him to have unprotected sex with them, knowing he's HIV positive, murdering them, and just feeling no empathy whatsoever for these women that he's picking up that are willing to sleep with him for $10 or $20. And they're obviously addicts and
desperate.
Struggling. And he just doesn't have any feelings whatsoever for these women being in such vulnerable states. In June of 1998, Francois claimed his sixth victim, Sandra Jean French. French was a drug addict and a sex worker who was known to law enforcement. For example, Sandra was arrested in 1980 for shooting a man.
Oh.
Sandra's daughter was pregnant during the summer of 1998, and though Sandra was residing in Oniontown, which is considered a shanty town.
What?
Yeah, it's kind of like this place where there's like these makeshift ramshackle.
Oniontown?
That's what they call it.
They're in Poughkeepsie?
It's on the outskirts, I suppose.
It's outside Poughkeepsie. Wow.
She was working the streets. So, even like kind of living in this, I mean, I don't know if it's exactly like a homeless encampment, but that's almost how it was described.
It sounds like at the very least, a kind of abandoned
Squatters
part of town
yeah.
where people kind of do what they want and nobody really cares.
And she's out working the streets, but she's still phoning her daughter several times a day to check on her condition. She would show up nearly every day at her daughter's house with food or some items that she had purchased for the baby. Sandra was excited to be a first-time grandma. Sandra was reported missing by her daughter on June 12th. And a few days later, on June 15th, her daughter was actually the one who went out and found Sandra's car abandoned in Poughkeepsie, just 3 blocks from Kendall Francois' home.
Damn.
So the daughter's been pretty vocal in this case. Pretty pissed off. She's like, it took me going out to find my mama's car after I've reported her missing. Like, police aren't doing shit to try to find her.
Well, like look, if she can go out and very pretty quickly find her mother's car, that means that leads you to believe they didn't really try very hard to look into it. I mean, how could you not feel like that?
Kendall had strangled Sandra, bathed her body in the tub. Now, the attic at this point was too crowded when he tried to place her there, so the following day, he carried Sandra's body downstairs to a crawl space in the basement. McKinley Francois, Kendall's dad, was known to sit in this empty basement, like for hours at a time, just feet away from where his son placed this body.
Oh my gosh.
Well, it was described as this empty basement where there's basically just like a washer and dryer.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I was like, that's really weird that he just goes down there and like hangs out in the basement. But it's probably the only place in the house that's not disgusting.
I was going to say the smell goes up, like heat smell rises. And I think the basement might have been the least smelly place.
It might have been the only like empty place in the house that wasn't piled up with trash.
She finds comfort in the musky, like dirt smell of the basement.
It'd probably be better than being up there in the shitty smell of the kitchen where there's turds on the floor.
Stop. That can't be real. Did you ever find pictures of this house?
I found pictures and I did see some photos online, but it's not really showing the dirty part of the house.
Dude, we needed hoarders to come through and tell.
Pictures that I saw mostly looked like maybe the house had been empty at that point, and it was just like the paint peeling from the walls. Just,
okay.
So I don't know. And the internet, you couldn't... I couldn't exactly make a determination. Is this for real the house, or are these just some weird pictures that someone has posted?
Right.
But I didn't actually get to see the hoard of trash and used condoms, sadly.
Stop. How you got a bag full of used condoms, dude?
They're not even in a bag, dude. They're just crusted in the carpet.
Well, I was just thinking if you gathered them up, you would have enough to have a bag of used condoms.
Which is weird because it sounds like he never even used. I mean, most of the women are saying he didn't even want to use condoms.
I'm trying to figure out, has he just has condoms that he's not even using when he's having sex? He just wants to have the aesthetic.
He's just walking around with the condoms on, just 'cause?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like his daily condom. Hey, could that dude punk band name Used Condoms? That's a good name.
Perfect. Crust punk.
That's definitely crust punk.
You should get your band and book maybe you could get booked at Muddy Roots next year.
Okay.
Now, with little evidence to place Kendall as their top suspect, detectives began exploring some other options. There was a guy in town named Mark King who was a known sexual predator in Poughkeepsie. He also had a history of abusing sex workers. King owned a lot of land. King's property was nestled among the farmlands surrounding the town, and law enforcement figured this would be a perfect dumping ground for bodies, which they had none. All they have are missing women. They don't have any bodies yet, right?
And that's kind of the odd, unintentional genius of our killer is he's kept all the bodies away and no one's discovered any of them. They've not been disposed or tossed out or any of that. And so that's probably really got the cops wondering, where are these women's remains if they are indeed dead?
Ramapo Search and Rescue volunteered to assist in a search of King's property with cadaver dogs in June of 1998, yet the search turned up nothing. But he also had acres of land, so they were like, well, that doesn't mean the bodies aren't here. August 5th of 1998, a sex worker named Lucy DeGaudio was picked up by Kendall. He took her to the garage on Fulton Avenue to a soiled mattress where he paid her $20 for sex. DeGaudio complained that the sexual encounter was painful and asked Kendall to stop. Instead, he punched her repeatedly until she passed out. When she came to, she saw Kendall towering over her. Shockingly, though, he allowed her to go. Yet the next day, Kendall called her at home to say if she told anyone about what had happened, she would be the, quote, victim of a crime.
You think that he held off because he's run out of body room?
I don't know. He also stalked her at her apartment, waiting outside, watching her. She was intimidated by Kendall and did not go to law enforcement until later.
Man, she need to give Kendall some hot lead, dude. Damn, this big hulking weirdo.
Audrey Pugliese, age 34, disappeared from Poughkeepsie in August of 1998. No one reported Audrey as a missing person. Kendall would later admit he flipped out during sex and strangled her. She was placed in the crawl space down in the basement.
He's asked his dad, hey, Dad, can you move? I got to put something here.
August 25th of 1998, Kendall picked up Katina Newmaster. Now, if you recall, she's the one who was sometimes a police informant and agreed to wear a wire and talk to Kendall. She was also the mother of 5, Dylan. He killed her in the garage. Now, she had been warned by Detective Segrist not to get in the car with Kendall Francois and not to go anywhere near him because he was a suspect.
I mean, yeah. Come on. The cops have had you actually literally wear a wire to get, some dirt on this guy. I'm sorry, and I get it. Money's money, whatever. But he can't be the only John in town. The only customer, if you will, of your wares.
It doesn't sound like it.
So,
it sounds like prostitution was rampant in this community, and there were a lot of Johns, and there were people traveling from other parts of the Hudson Valley to pick up prostitutes in this town.
Oh, so it's popping.
It's popping.
So you just don't go with the smelly, scary guy. I mean, I'm sorry, but what are you doing?
I don't know. Well, the last time that Katina's sister Tammy had seen her, she had been clean for days. She was clean and sober, She was doing really well. It was kind of the first time she'd been clean and sober for a minute. Katina was energized by her sobriety and excited to be wearing a new denim dress. And her sister said she kept like strutting around and posing in this dress like she was feeling herself, feeling cute.
I remember those denim dresses back in the day.
Yeah. I like them. They're so cute.
I think they should come back.
I had this really badass like white denim dress when I was in the 9th grade. And it was kind of like a mini dress, and it buttoned up the front and had a collar that I like pop up on it.
The big collar?
Well, it was, it was just a cute collar. It was kind of, you popped your collar a little bit. It was a sleeveless dress.
Ooh,
baby. It was really cute.
I bet you was cute.
Yeah, well, But Katina had been described by others as a follower who would do anything to be liked or be popular, and that she was pretty, like, easily impressionable. So I guess when you think about that, it might not be difficult for Kendall to lure her in the car because she wants to be liked. So she might be willing to be like, okay, I'll go with you, because she doesn't want him to be mad at her or something.
Well, I mean, that's one thing we've at length discussed, drug addiction and, kind of this desperate place that people do this. But, there's a lot of reasons that people do this type of thing. And sometimes people are just want to be wanted or feel affection, and that's sad when you think about it.
Law enforcement didn't get another break in the case until September 1st of 1998. A sex worker named Christine Sala agreed to accompany Kendall to his home on Fulton Avenue. He demanded sex from Sala, who refused. So he punched her in the face, grabbed her by the throat, and pulled her out of the car. They're in the garage. He pulled the car into the garage, and so this happens in the garage. Kendall demanded oral sex from her and told her, "I'll kill you. I'll kill you." And the thought of having to perform oral sex on this guy who does not shower makes me want to throw up.
It's disgusting.
Disgusting. After the assault, Sala needed to escape. She convinced Kendall to drive her to a convenience store where she could get some cigarettes. Just before they arrived at the Sunoco, Sala jumped out of the car and ran away. Detectives were already in that area with missing persons flyers for Katina Newmaster. So they're passing these out. And that's when a witness approached their unmarked car and told them that there was a woman who had just been assaulted. They were pretty quickly able to locate Sala, who told them how Kendall had attacked her. She was brought to the police station to file a complaint. Law enforcement arrived shortly after, around 3 p.m. at the Francois home to speak with Kendall about the attack. He agreed to go to the station for an interview. After being Mirandized, Kendall didn't request a lawyer like the last time. Instead, he admitted that he had assaulted Sala, saying, quote, "I got angry and grabbed her by the throat. We continued having sex, and I began choking her with my hands." Now, in the meantime, Sala had gone to the hospital to have a rape kit performed. Around 4:30 p.m., detectives sat down for a second interview with Kendall. Kendall again didn't ask for a lawyer even after being read his rights for a second time. Kendall asked if he could see photographs of missing prostitutes dating back to 1993.
Oh my gosh.
1993? Detectives only knew about missing women since 1996. So they're like, are there more victims that we don't know about?
Wow.
Yeah. So they agree. They print out these photos and Kendall starts sorting through them. He picks 4 photos from the missing women: Wendy Myers, Gina Barone, Catherine Marsh, and Sandra French. He casually says, "I killed them."
Holy cow.
When asked about Michelle Eason or Kathleen Hurley, he said he didn't remember them. Once Kendall started confessing, he just couldn't stop. He's arrested and charged with a single count of murder in the death of Katina Newmaster. Around 1 a.m., a search warrant is drawn up, and that's when a team of detectives, the forensic team, the district attorney, and all these other crime scene investigators show up at the home, and it was McKinley who answered the door. McKinley, by the way, slept on what was described as an oily couch in the living room.
Stop. An oily couch?
Yeah.
I've never in my life heard a couch described as that.
That's why I had to include it, because my mind doesn't even know where to begin imagining an oily couch.
You just sit down, you slide off into the floor.
I guess.
Oh my gosh!
Maybe
No,
I bet Diddy had an oily couch.
look. Let's be honest. You probably stick to this couch. Jeez.
So he's asleep on the couch in the living room. His daughter Kirsten, a college student studying family science, slept in another room that was off by the kitchen. Her mattress was lying on piles of garbage, again, framed by used condoms, soiled clothing. And the detective said there were maggot casings, like, on her mattress. So she's, like, sleeping in the bed with, like, maggots and maggot casings.
So, well, that means the maggots have turned to flies and they left their little casing behind, right? God, I bet those flies were badass. I bet they had the biggest flies. Oh, my goggins.
Paulette had a bedroom upstairs. Kendall's childhood bedroom was for sex and murder. He had actually been sleeping in his brother Audrey's old bedroom. Aubrey was a graduate of Syracuse University and no longer resided in the home. The Francois family was hustled out the door so law enforcement could begin their search. The family stayed with their oldest daughter Raquel, who had an apartment in town. Sifting through mountains of trash, feces, urine, broken furniture, old food, empty bottles, detectives were overwhelmed. These investigators just didn't even know where to start. They had to wear PPE gear, like hazmat suits and masks. One detective would say he ruined 2 pairs of boots during the search. Had to throw out 2 pairs of boots.
Oh, yeah, so they got the Tyvek suits on.
The Tyveks, exactly. That was what they were wearing.
I know exactly what they're wearing. I've wore it in an industrial setting when things are really gross and nasty and dangerous, and respirators.
Yes, they're wearing respirators.
Because you're going to have the ammonia and things like that from the urine. Jesus. And just, look, this is a biological hazard, this house. This stuff, the food and all this stuff rotting. And God, don't get me started on the body fluids. You could literally catch God knows what. Here you have this guy's a HIV positive. I don't even.
The spread of an infectious disease, very possible with this.
Dude, no telling what's living in this house. All this time they've wanted to search
Roaches,
this house.
Maggots everywhere.
And now they've gotten in there and they're like, oh my God.
Rats. How do these people live in this?
Why?
I don't know.
Why would you live in this? It's one thing not to have a perfectly clean house.
The mother's a psychiatric nurse.
That's what I'm saying. You got kids going to college.
I know. I don't know. The first body was found in the basement crawl space, and that was Audrey Pugliese. An investigator saw her knee through a clear plastic bag. Her skeletal remains had been placed in a child's plastic kiddie pool in the crawl space.
Yeah.
In total, detectives found 8 bodies inside the Fulton Avenue home. The media would dub it, quote, Poughkeepsie's House of Horrors. Neighbors described the house's stench, but others were baffled. Paulette's co-workers at the hospital were in shock. They said there had been some times when she had shown up to work looking maybe a bit disheveled, like she'd slept in her clothes, but they had no idea that she was living in this kind of filth. They were like, dude, she seems totally normal, like bubbly, enthusiastic, really positive, a good worker.
Wow.
Yeah. Items were removed from the house, boxes and boxes and bags of evidence. And they were having to sort of sort between what would be evidence and trash. It took forever. It took them like weeks into months to get through this house. When the press caught wind of the arrest, newspapers began criticizing law enforcement, especially when they learned the number of sex workers who had reported Kendall for various assaults and rapes. Yet detectives pushed back, reminding the media of their lack of interest in the missing persons cases. The public expects things to be kind of tied up in this neat bow, but that's not really how serial killer cases work. And there's a lot of red tape that people don't think about. Detectives have to work within the parameters of the law, and without witness cooperation and a lack of evidence, there's not a whole lot they can do.
And I think that's a good point. I think both sides have good points to a degree. But that's a great point on investigators' part. It's like, just because you didn't think it was sensational enough or important. We announced that we were possibly, having a serial killer or investigating a serial killer here in our area, and you didn't even want to, offer up any front page for it.
Yeah, how dare you? But then you're going to turn around and insult us or criticize us like we're not doing our job when you didn't even report on it.
Yeah.
Exactly. The displaced Francois family refused to speak to the press. They hired a lawyer named Marco Cavaglia to represent their interests. Again, coworkers who knew Paulette could not believe that she had lived in a home with 8 decomposing bodies. One of her coworkers said, quote, "She's not a genius, but she's not stupid." People speculated that the Francois family had to just out and out be in denial about what was happening. I mean, how would you not know there are 8 bodies in your house rotting away?
That's a lot of bodies.
I don't get it. Are you really going to believe it's raccoons?
Oh, but damn, is it a 75-pound raccoon? What the hell's going on here?
A cousin named Monray Francois became a bit of an unofficial family spokesperson. He told the press, quote, "You can't pick your family," when it came to defending Paulette, McKinley, Kirsten,
but you can,
people who were living in the house.
You can pick up trash, though.
He said Kendall's siblings at the time were more focused on Paulette's health than Kendall's arrest. And when asked what possibly could have made him do these things, the cousin said, quote, "I don't know what made him tick. We'll have to wait until the movie comes out."
Okay, it's a great family spokesperson.
The bodies were so badly decomposed, they were mostly skeletal remains, so they had to bring in forensic dentists to identify the bodies. With the House of Horrors all over the news, crowds gathered outside to watch for hours as the forensics team carried out bags of evidence. There were people with strollers with their kids standing out watching.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The Francois family, they were homeless. Their house had been seized by law enforcement, and they were unable to obtain their personal papers from the home, funds, no access to their property, their clothing.
So they weren't allowed to come back in and remove anything?
Nothing.
Well, look, we've carried on about how dirty the house is. I feel bad for them.
Well,
I mean, they didn't ask for this.
They didn't, and I mean, they're also being victimized by this situation.
They didn't know. They didn't participate in the sick stuff that their son and brother was doing. I mean, he and again, this goes back to the selfishness and not caring at all for others. He doesn't care.
Well, due to the reports of the family's unkemptness, they were unable to rent. No one wanted to rent to known hoarders or people who lived in the squalor.
Oh, I didn't think about that. So they can't even find somewhere else to go.
Yeah, I mean, their attorney was pretty vocal about, these people are also victims. Instead of blaming them that they didn't know or didn't report this. I mean, he's like, they're also victims. They can't even find a place to live. No one will rent to them.
That's terrible.
I think they ended up having to go to Connecticut to get a place to stay.
So had to leave jobs, leave their whole life.
Well, she was actually, I think that some of the family may have gone to Connecticut to stay, but Paulette, she was actually pretty close to her retirement. She'd been 30 years at her job and was pretty close to retirement. So she kind of had to stay with friends from church and coworkers to finish out her retirement.
Oh, wow.
And here's a woman who spent 30 years in this job and was considered a really good employee. And it was described that her retirement was this really solemn event that she basically just came in, packed her desk and left. Didn't even have a party for her or anything.
Under this air of all this stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really, really sad.
A grand jury formally charged Kendall with the first murder. And on September 8th of 1998, Kendall entered a plea of not guilty. It wasn't until October 13th that he was officially charged with all the murders. Under New York state law, the district attorney is able to pursue the death penalty for first-degree murders, including serial murders. And though the DA made the decision to ask for that sentence, it may only be imposed by the jury, which has heard this case. So Francois' attorneys chose to plead guilty on December 23rd before the DA had decided whether to seek the death penalty, thereby avoiding trial by jury and the possibility of death.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and a lot of Kendall's decision to just plead guilty is that he didn't want to upset his mother any further.
Oh, okay. Wow.
That's what he said. He didn't want to have to go through trial. But what it was, he was a coward. He was really terrified to face these families in court.
No, that's what it is. He doesn't care about his mom. I don't believe that for a minute. And the way the law there is structured, he avoided the death penalty. Didn't have to worry about. Well, that's an interesting way it's set up.
Well, on February 11th of 1999, the Dutchess County Court ruled that the guilty plea could not be accepted. Later, it was discovered that Kendall contracted HIV from one of his victims. His defense team took the case to the State Court of Appeals, which upheld his guilty plea in a ruling in March of 2000. On August 11th of 2000, Judge Thomas Dolan formally sentenced Kendall Francois to life in prison without parole. He was actually given 8 consecutive life sentences. He was housed at Attica Correctional. He died at age 43 of a cancerous mass in his groin. So let's hope that was really painful.
Good. I'm glad.
The film The Poughkeepsie Tapes, the horror movie, is loosely based on Kendall Francois.
Oh, I've never seen that.
I have tried to watch it a couple of times and I just can't get into it. There are people out there who really like it and claim that it's such a great, like, terrifying horror movie.
Really?
I think it's just really bad. I don't like found footage.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite.
It's not.
And I don't know. Like I said, I've tried to watch it and every time I make it in about 15 minutes and then turn it off.
I'm going to try it again now.
So my resources for today, my main resource was Body Dump by Fred Rosen. And there's also a book called The Spider and the Fly by Claudia Rowe. She was a reporter who began a correspondence with Kendall. But I will go ahead and say this. I don't recommend it. It's a terrible book.
Yeah, you were trying to fight your way through this book.
I did not like it. I don't like the structure of the book. And I feel like she was like fangirling over this correspondence with a serial killer. Like she literally describes meeting him in like when he's in jail and how her heart was racing like she was going on her first high school date. And I'm like, that's kind of gross.
That seems insensitive.
And I feel like the serial killer or her correspondence with Francois is like a secondary. The book is more about her and her life and like her childhood. Like she wants to write a book about herself and then just sort of adds this correspondence with a serial killer in so people will read the book.
Really?
Oh gosh. I just reading this, I was like, this book is fucking awful. And yeah. I mean, someone else might like The Spider and the Fly, but I did not care for it at all. I thought it was terrible.
You said it was all over the place.
Yeah.
It had poor structure. And again, you said, you said more than once that she kind of made it about her and how cool it was. She was, talking to this serial killer.
And talking about like her relationship with her mother and her childhood. And I'm just like, what does that have to, I mean, are you writing about Kendall Francois or are you like wanting to talk about yourself? Anyway, I just did not enjoy it.
Okay.
So
wow, that's a scathing indictment of the source material.
0 out of 10. Do not recommend.
Damn.
I also referred to newspapers. There were quite a few articles published in the New York Times, the Hudson Valley Country, and the Poughkeepsie Journal.
Damn. This is crazy. He was a monster.
Yes.
He was out of control. It's like he didn't even care. It was very poorly planned. And you were telling me that he did a lot of all this in a very rather quick period of time.
It was basically like a year and a half.
8 victims?
Yeah.
In a year and a half. That's
from fall of 96 to fall of 98.
Yeah.
With a period of, like a couple of months or whatever from the spring through the summer of 98, I guess a bit of a cooling off period.
My gosh. Once he figured out he liked this, he just did it.
He just did it.
And he reasoned it away as, they made me mad or they said this about me, blah, this and that. That's bullshit. He enjoyed killing. He had a big victim pool and the willingness of these people to go with this stranger. Word on the street is a real thing. The streets speak. Okay?
But I feel like I'm about to get schooled.
But
Dylanisms.
word gets around that there's this big, and he's not someone, he stands out.
He's
let's
not an
say.
inconspicuous person.
This big hulking smelly guy with a big,
I mean, I hate to make this comparison, but he's like Professor Clump from The Nutty Professor. Like, that's what he looks like. He looks so much like Eddie Murphy in that movie. Like, just the face and stuff.
Oh, my gosh.
And then he's just like this big, huge, hulking
gross,
guy.
smelly guy.
And on top of it, he stinks.
He stinks. He's mean.
But when I saw his picture, my first thought was, oh my gosh, it's like a real Professor Clump. Like, it's the Nutty Professor.
So I'm just kind of, like it's sad that these women were willing to continue to deal with this person. Even after word got around that, hey, at the very least, he's not a good client. You know what I'm saying? In many ways. Gosh.
Well, no one deserves this.
No one deserves it.
No one deserves this to happen, regardless of, whether they were sex workers or addicts. No one deserves this.
No.
But I hate to be like, but I guess I'm also thinking, I can't wrap my head around being told by a detective, do not get in the car with this person. We're pretty sure he's a serial killer and responsible for murdering these women that that have gone missing. And you still get in the damn car with him.
I know. It blows my mind.
I mean, I just don't understand.
It's for that quick buck in that moment, I guess. But I don't that one particular victim and given everything that happened, I mean, come on. What are you doing?
I don't know. I just can't wrap my head around it at all.
Well, thank you.
But what's very strange about Kendall is that he's such an interesting, I guess, case study, because it seems like his siblings were all relatively successful. They're still alive. Now, from what I gathered through my research, I believe his parents, like his father passed away in 1999, and I believe his mom passed away a few years ago, Paulette. But his siblings are relatively successful people. I mean, they've moved out of state, and I was able to find their information online, and
right.
They're successful college graduates, good jobs. And then you have Kendall.
Yeah, and there was really no
there were no reports
evidence of a head trauma or abuse
growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, the only form of abuse really would be living in this house, this dirty house.
Yeah, I got to say, I don't think Kendall created that entire atmosphere himself. I think he just kind of grew up in this, and for whatever reason.
But could this growing up in this filth, I mean...
That's not enough.
I'm like, is that enough to make you a killer to murder 8 women?
No.
Possibly more. Detectives were even trying to look into other places like in Hawaii where he had been stationed. There had actually been some unsolved strangulation murders, but they decided not to pursue, I guess, investigating that because those victims had been like blonde and blue-eyed women, so they didn't really fit into this profile. But there could be more.
There could be more, but I think that it sounded like he had a type. He's one of those serial killers that have a type for whatever reason, and I think that he stuck with that. So, wow.
All right, Dylan. Well, thank you for sitting down with me today to discuss Kendall Francois.
It was scary. I have so many feelings after this episode. And thank you again to Judy for sponsoring today's show and accessing all that ad-free and extra content over there on the Discord.
And thank you to everyone out there who showers and uses deodorant.
I'm sorry, on the Patreons.
Cleans their house.
Yes, thank you for picking up your used condoms. Seriously.
Ew.
Just put them all in a bag.
I'm so happy that you don't sleep in a maggot bed.
God, I got to go take a shower.
I know, right?
All righty.
All right, bye.
Bye.